Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 28 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're learning how to think like an engineer using the Arduino Uno R4 Wi-Fi. What I will need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice. No sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Sunfounder. Sunfounder is actually sponsoring this most excellent series of video lessons. And in this class, we will be using the Sunfounder Elite Explorer Kit. Now, hopefully most of you guys already have your gear, but if you don't, take a look down in the description. There is a link over to Amazon and you can hop on over there and pick your kit up. And believe me, your life and my life are going to be a whole lot easier if we are working on identical hardware. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and talk about what I am going to teach you today. And what I'm going to teach you is I'm going to teach you how to use that LED matrix that is on your Arduino Uno R4 Wi-Fi. I'm going to show you how to put those LEDs in the state that you want them in, how to interact with them, and even how to do some scrolling text on it. Sound pretty good? I hope it does. So as always, what we want to do, instead of just jumping in and starting to code, we want to kind of understand. We want to understand how to interact with these LED. The first thing that you'll see is that there are 8 rows and there are 12 columns. So think of it as a think of it as a matrix, 8 rows and 12 columns. Okay, so how do we interact with those 8 rows and 12 columns? What's 8 times 12? Is that like 96 or something like that? Hope it is. All right. How do we interact with those pixels? So let's come over here. And what I want you to see is let's see if I can draw this. So you're going to have my thing doesn't want to draw today. Let's see. Okay, I think that will work now. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm not going to fill in all the dots, but you kind of get the idea. Now, these are the rows, and these are the columns. Okay. Now, the other thing that you have to see is you have to see that these are sort of like X values and these are sort of like Y values. Now, this is something that we have to see. What we have to see is we have a 2-dimensional array. Okay, we have to see that we have a 2-dimensional array. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up a matrix. And this is the first time that we've used matrices in these classes, but a matrix is a variable that you store lots of values in and you index those values based on their position, like which column are they in, which row are they in. Okay, does that make sense? So what we're going to call this, we're going to have what type of variable? Well, it's going to be a byte. Now, we haven't done byte either. What we have done is we've done integer, which is the counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. What we've done is floats, which are the in-between numbers. And what we've done are strings. But a byte is a simpler variable type, and a byte is either 0 or 1. So our variable type is going to be byte, and I think that I will call my variable frame. Now I have to tell it, since I'm going to make frame an array, I'm going to have to tell it how many rows it has. How many rows does it have? It has 8 rows. And how many columns does it have? 12. 12 columns. So you always have to remember when you're dealing with a matrix, as a variable type, as a data object, it always goes row by column, R, C, or R cross C. It's row first and then column, and that's the kind of math way of thinking about it. And I would always figure out a kid in the class whose name was Ryan or Ronald, and I'd say, remember, Ryan's crazy. That's what I would get them to remember it. And so, like, if I wanted to address this pixel here, what would I say this pixel is? Well, that would be frame. Okay, that would be frame. And then what row is it? That is row 2, the second row, but we start counting at row 0. So this would be row 0 and this would be row 1. So that is frame, row 1, and then what column? 0, 1, 2. So that would be how we would designate that pixel. We would give it the variable name and then the row position and then the column position, and that is how we would index it. We would have to set the variable up like this, and so now you see what I have is I have this array, I have this data structure, and what's going to be in the data structure is a bunch of zeros and ones. And so let's come in here and let's say that we wanted to have everything off. Okay, we would want to have everything off, and then we could turn something on. Okay, we would want to have everything off, and then we would turn something on. Well, I've got to put all the data into frame. So what I could say is I could say something like, we would do it like this. I would say frame. And what I could go ahead is I could just declare it here. Okay, so I'm going to declare it, and as I declare it, I'm going to put the data in it. I have to tell it how many rows, 8. I have to tell it how many columns, 12. Okay, now what is that equal to? Well, what I have to do is I have to open the matrix with an open curly. Now the matrix is open. I'm in the matrix. Now what do I have to do? I have to open the first row. So this one is open the matrix. This is open the first row. Now I've got to tell it every piece of data. And again, let's say here that we're just going to put all zeros in. So this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, and no trailing comma after that last 0. Okay. Okay, no trailing comma after that last 0. There we go. So that is the first row. Now what do I have to do? I have to end the first row, and then what do I have to do? I have to put a comma. Okay, I have to put a comma. Now, what am I ready to do? I'm ready to open the second row, which is going to be row 1. First one's row 0. Now this is row 1. Now I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, now I close that row. Now what do I need? I need a comma. Now what do? I come here and open the next one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And did I do that right above? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, that one's right. And then what I'm going to do is, so this is row 0, row 1, row 2, and then I'm going to do the same thing, row 3, row 4, row 5, row 6, and row 7. Okay, row 0 to row 7 is how many rows? 8. So I'm going to go ahead and do row 7. Okay, and so this one up here, row 6, I would end, and then of course there was a comma here, and then this row 6, it's going to end in a comma. Okay. Okay, row 6 is going to end in a comma. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, and now I'll go ahead and put row 7 in, and so that's 1. Yeah, let me go back to red. Okay, let me go back to red. So this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now what do I have to do? I have to close the row. Now that is the last row. So I do not put a comma. Okay, I do not put a comma there. And let me make sure that you can see this. I think I better turn the titles off. Okay, so you see right at the end of that, I do not put a comma because there's not another row. What do I do now? I come down and I close the matrix. So this is close the matrix, and this was close the last row. Let me get further out of your way. Close the last row, like that. Okay. Now that is my data structure. Now what I do is I go in and then I give a command, which is to render the bitmap, and I tell it what the bitmap is, which is frame. So I'm going to show you the exact line in a minute, but once I set this array up, then I just say render bitmap of this frame, and then that exact pattern will come over here onto this array of LEDs. And so I set up the matrix, I send it to the Arduino, and then those LEDs go in the state that I want there. Well, let's say that I wanted to make the 4 corners turn on. Well, in that case, what I would do is I would say frame. Okay, now the frame, which one? Well, I want row 0, column 0. So it would be 0, 0. That would be the upper left, and I would set that equal to 1. And then frame, and then, oh, that was not right. It should be like that. Okay, open, 0, close, open, 0, close. Then I have frame, and then what? Row 0, and then column what? 7, like that. I set that equal to a 1. That's the upper right. Now I'm going to say frame. I'm going to say frame. And then what am I going to do? I am going to do the lower left, which this time is going to be, or I messed up on that last one. Okay, let me come back here. It's row 0, and it is column 11. Row 0, column 11 is equal to 1. That's the upper right. And now I would say frame, and then what? Row 7, which is the bottom row, and column 0 equal to 1. Now that is going to be the lower left. And then finally, frame of 7, 11, and that is going to be equal to 1. Now, what would I do if I rendered that bitmap? Well, it would turn this one on, it would turn this one on, it would turn this one on, and it would turn this one on. So I can turn any one of them on and off at will, right? I can turn any one of them on and off at will just by adjusting the frame variable, and then after adjusting the frame variable, then I render that frame, I render that bitmap a frame over to the array. And I'll give you the exact commands for that here in just a second. But I wanted you to kind of just talk through it so that you don't just go in and kind of start trying to copy me without really understanding what I am doing, if that makes sense. So let's come in here. Okay, let's come in here. And where did we go? Come over to our code view. All right, so I need you to go ahead and open up a bare minimum and then make sure that you've got things set to the COM that has the Wi-Fi on it, and then or the Arduino Wi-Fi on it, and then make sure that you come in and you're doing the Arduino Uno R4 Wi-Fi, okay, because the one that's the minima, it doesn't have the array. So what are we going to do? Well, the first thing we've got to do is we've got to load a library. So we're going to do a pound include, and you've got to type this in perfectly and in the quotes, Arduino underscore LED underscore matrix dot H. And then you close the quote. Then remember, when we're doing these library loads, it's one of the only things. The library loads are one of the only things that don't have a semicolon at the end of them. Now, before this thing is over, or let's see, yeah, before this thing is over, we're going to need a few variables. Let's go ahead and set up our baud rate BR and set that to 115,200 like that. And then let's go ahead and put a delay time of DT is equal to 10 milliseconds like that. And now what we need to do is we need to set up our frame variable. And so I'm going to call that a data type byte, and then I'm going to call it, the variable name is frame. You could call this whatever you wanted. You could call it my matrix. You could call it whatever you wanted, but I'm going to call mine frame, and I'm going to tell it that it has eight rows, and it has what? It has 12 columns, okay? And then it is equal to what? I've got to open the matrix, okay? So what you've got to see is this opens the matrix, this closes the matrix. Now I need to what? I need to open the first row. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, okay? Now after that last zero, there is no comma, because there's not another zero. Let's check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now what do I need to do? I've closed the first row, which is row 0. Now I put a comma. Now I need to do what? I need to do the second row. So I'm just going to take this, Control C, and then I'm going to put it here. And so this is row, I have row 0. This is row 1. This is row 2, this is row 3, this is row 4, this is row 5, this is row 6, and this is row 7, okay? That should be how many rows? 8. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, I hate that pop-up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, starting at row 0, ending at row 7, 8 rows altogether, and then we have 12 commas. All right, so I've got that set up. That is good. So now I'm going to come in and I'm going to go ahead and set up my serial monitor, because we're probably going to want to print something before this is all over. Serial.begin. And what are we going to do? BR for the baud rate, like that. And then we're going to come over here, and now we got to do some more things up here. So what we've done is we've loaded the library, but after we load the library, what we need to do is we need to create the matrix object. We have to create the matrix object so that when we interact with that object, we are really interacting with this array of LEDs down here. So I think I'm going to call mine matrix. And so what do? I give the library name Arduino LED matrix, okay? and that is the method inside the library. And then what am I going to call my object? Matrix. Okay, like that. I'm going to run this thing just to catch all my silly errors before we go on too much further. So let's go ahead and run this. It's not going to do anything, but I just want to get my errors out of here. Now, how did that get an error so quickly? Boy, did I not close something? Okay. This is a little perplexing here. So this, oh, yeah. You see, this, my friend, is just a normal something equals something. So after I close the row, I close the array. Who is your friend? Mr. Semicolon, which I forgot. Okay. But do you see how much easier it is if you kind of run it along the way and find your errors as you're going? So that looks good. Okay, so now we've got that set up, and then we come down in our void setup, and I put that serial begin in the void loop by accident, so I am going to cut it. And everybody knows that the serial begin goes in the void setup. Okay, now I've got to start the matrix. I created the matrix object. Now I have to initialize it. I have to start it with matrix. That's the object that I created up here. That's the object I created up here. And I just got to do a begin like that. And so now I've activated that matrix. Okay. Now, what could I do here? What could I do? Well, let's just come in, and now let's just send our data frame down to our matrix. So what would I do? Matrix, which is our object we created, dot render bitmap, which is a method inside of that library, render bitmap. What do I want to send it? I want to send it frame, or whatever you named yours. I called mine frame. And now I have to remind Mr. Render Bitmap how big my matrix is, how big my data array is that I'm sending. And it was 8 rows by 12 columns, right? Remember, it's Ryan's Crazy, RC, row and then column. Okay, row and then column. That looks pretty good. And so now I am going to close that. And now let's just see if it runs, and all eyes on the matrix here. And now we're going to run it, and we see that no orange. That's good. No orange. It's looking good, looking good. It's downloading, and boom, it is downloaded. What do we see on our matrix? Absolutely nothing. Why do we see absolutely nothing? Because what did we send it? We sent it all zeros. So what could I do here? What could I do? What if I said take frame of, let's say, row 2, and then column 4, and let's say that we set that equal to 1. Okay, now let's see what happens when we run it. Okay, I think I'll switch over here to this view. I think it's going to run, and boom, look at that. So what is this? This is row 0, row 1, row 2, and then what do I have? I have column 0, column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. Works perfectly. If you remember that you start counting at 0, everything is going to work really well. Well, what if we go back and we want the 4 corners on and everything else off? So I would put frame of 0, 0, that's the upper left. Okay, and now to make things a little easier, I'm going to take that and I'm going to paste it, and then I'm going to say row 0, column 11, because we're starting counting at 0. That's like that. Okay, and then I'm going to do row 7, which is the bottom row, column 0, so that's the bottom left, and then we're going to do the last corner, which is going to be row 7, column 11, like that. Now let's try that. You didn't see any of that, did you? Okay, I'm not going to type it in again, but this is what I did here. Okay, so I took frame 0, 0, made it 1. Frame 0, 11, made it 1. Frame 7, 0, made it 1. Frame 7, 11, made it 1. So this is the upper left, upper right, lower left, lower right, and you adjust the frame before you render it. You adjust the frame before you render it. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, so now that looks pretty good. Okay, so let's think of some other things that we could do if we wanted to get a little bit more fancy. What if we wanted to just step through step by step by step and turn them all ones, but instead of just continuing to alter that frame by rewriting it or setting individual things, what if we put it in a couple of loops? Okay, what if we put it in a couple of loops? And so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go, and what I'm going to have is my I value is going to be my column, and my J value is going to be my row. And so I'm going to make a few variables up here. I'm going to say int I, and I don't need to give I a value because I'll do that in the for loop, and then int j. So I've set up I and j. That looks good. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say for, I'm going to make a for loop, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to say int, okay, or I don't need to say int because I already defined it up there. I'm going to say I want to start with I equals 0 and then a semicolon, and I want to loop from I as long as I is less than or equal to 11, right? I is stepping through the columns, okay? I is stepping through the columns, and so each time through, I want I equal to I plus 1. And so what is that going to do? That is going to step through the columns one by one. All right. So what could I do here? I could say, well, let's make frame, and I want to start with row, column. Row was what? It was J. Okay. And then column was what? Let's see. I'm going to step with I is the columns. And so I'm going to step through I. And that is the column. So I got to give it a row. And so I'm just going to give it, let's say, row 2. So what am I trying to do? I'm trying to turn row 2 on. So I tell it it's row 2, and then I step all the way across. And then what am I going to do? I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to set that equal to 1. Okay? So I'm going to go to row 2. I'm going to step across the columns, and this should make row 2. This should make row 2 turn on. So let's see if I'm thinking about this right. Okay. So I'm stepping from, it's looking good, looking good. And then what are we seeing? It's downloading. We have hope. And boom, look at that. Let's come over here and look more closely. Okay, so this is row 0, row 1, and row 2 is all on. Okay, row 2 is all on. Well, let's come over here and think, well, what if I want to turn a column on? Okay, well, for a column, I'm going to use J because J is going to be our column. But this time, how many? Yeah, I stepped through the columns. This time, I'm going to step through the rows. How many should I go to? Not 11, but 7. Okay. So this time, I'm going to step through the columns. And this time, J is going to be equal to J plus 1. And remember, I have row and I have column. This time, I'm stepping across the row. So what should that be? J. Now, what column do I want to turn on? Let's say that I'm going to turn on column 7, like that. Okay, so I'm stepping, J is stepping me through the rows, but I'm going to stay at column 7. So this should light up column 7, if that makes sense. What did I do? J is equal to J plus 1. So let's try that again. Let's come over here. And boom, 0, 1, let's see. I'll show it with my pencil. Column 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, so we got that. That's looking pretty good. So let's think if we could do something else, okay? This time, what I want to do is I want to step through all the rows and I want to step through all the columns, okay? And so I'm going to start by stepping through the columns. So this for loop, it steps through, this for loop step through the rows, but I'm going to have that inside of one that steps through the column, okay? So I'm going to set the column, and then I'm going to step through all the rows. And then I'm going to increment the column and step through all the rows. Then I'm going to increment the column and step through all the rows. So this one is controlling the column, okay? I mean, this one is controlling the row, and this one's going to control the column. So I'm going to put one above it, 4. And what was our column? I. For I equals 0 to I is less than or equal to. Okay, how many columns do I have? 12, so I'll go less than or equal to 11 because I'm starting at 0, and I equal I plus 1. So that is going to step through the columns, and then the J is going to step through the rows. Now, what do I need to do? I need to open this. Now, I've got to be careful where I close it because I want this whole thing inside the first for loop. So I need to take this off. Okay, this closes the J for loop, and now I need to add a curly to close the I for loop. Does that make sense? Now, what am I going to do inside of there? I'm going to say this time frame of J is the row, and I is the column. And this should turn on everything in there if I'm thinking about this right. Okay, if I'm thinking about it right. What did that do? How could I have made a mistake in so few lines of code? Oh, I always put a comma. This is a vexing problem because most programming languages you would use a comma here, but that needed to be a semicolon. So let's come in here now, and I think it's going to run this time. So we'll come over here and let's look at this, and boom, look at that, we turned it on. Hey, I can't remember. I think it might have been Lori that I saw. This is really hard to get these things to show, especially when you just have one pixel on the camera. It's very bright in real life, but what I think I saw Lori do is just a little bit of this Mylar, that the little bags, just take a little bit of that, and then it shows up much better on the camera. It shows up much better on the camera like that. So we got them all on there. That's pretty neat. Well, what would also be kind of neat is, what if I rendered it row by row? Okay, I want to render it so I want to render it column by column. Okay, I want to render it column by column. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut it. And rather than waiting for the whole thing, before I render it, I'm going to render it after it has completed a row. So it's going to change the row and then I'll render it. Then it's going to change the row and I'm going to render it. So I'm going to render it after the inside for loop, but still inside of the outside for loop. And I think we should see the rows show up individually this time. Okay, and I see what happened. I need to put a delay in here. So let's put a delay of dt, because it did what I said, but it just did it so fast we couldn't see it. So let's say 250, about a quarter of a second. Now let's see what happens. That's looking good. Let's switch over here and let's see what happens. And we got, column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. Yeah, it did it backwards from what I said it was doing columns. Why did it do it by columns? Let's think about it. Okay, so what was that inside loop? That inside loop was going through the rows, and so it's updating the rows, and then I render, and it's updating the rows, and I render, updating the rows, and I render. So that is why it did it that way. That is why it did it that way. But let's see if I came in, and what if I put this? What if I cut this, both the delay and the render? And what if I put it inside the inside for loop? Now it's going to show me what? Pixel by pixel as those things are turned on. And since I don't want to wait several minutes, let's just take this down to 25. We should be able to see it, but we should see it populating the rows like that. So let's come in and do that. See what happens. All eyes on, there it is, boom, 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 boom. So you see we can watch it populating it pixel by pixel that way. Well, let's look at something neat. What if we said frame of ji, instead of setting it equal to 1, what if we set it to not frame of ji? What do you think that's going to do? Okay, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to cut this and I'm going to render it column by column. So I'm simply going to put it after that. Okay, so make sure you understand this closes the inside for loop, this closes the outside for loop, this closes the void loop. You didn't see that, did you? I am sorry, I got to do better about that. So what I did was I took this had been inside. What you guys had is you guys had it up here, right? We had it up here. It was up there. And what I did was I took it out from the inside for loop and I put it after the close of the inside for loop. So what does this mean? We're going to update the column and then we're going to show it. Update the next column and then show it. And then we're going to say frame of ji is not frame of ji. So you guys tell me what's it going to do when we run this. Somebody tell me, leave a comment down below. What do you think is going to happen when we run this? Pause the video, leave the comment before you watch it run. Okay, so we are going to run it, and I'll come over to this view. Man, I've done 2 pieces of code without you being able to see it, but I want you to see this as we're doing it, okay? There, look, the first time, if it's all 0, it's turning them to 1s. Now that they're all 1s, when we do not a 1, it goes back to 0. And so we go like that. What if we made that a little bit, let's make that a little bit slower. Let's say like let's say 150, something like that. Okay, now let's run that. Now, what if you wanted to do rows instead of columns? If you wanted to update rows instead of columns, you know, you would want to go like this. Well, all you would do, yeah, that's working beautifully. All you would do is you would make your outside for loop rows, and you would make your inside for loop columns, and then you could go up and down like that. Okay, so guys, right now what you can do is you can get whatever you want on that screen just by modifying your frame matrix and then doing a matrix.render bitmap. Okay, now as I was looking at this, I was a little bit disappointed that Arduino has some graphic driving libraries, but I couldn't get those libraries to work correctly with the matrix right now. And I think what that library is called, it's called the Arduino graphics library. And that's to drive any graphic display like LED arrays or, you know, little displays. You just got to give it the rows and columns and a few setup things. But what I found is when I tried to use that on this, matrix. For some reason, I couldn't address row 0. Row 0 didn't work. And then there were other things that were giving me unexpected behaviors. And I spent a couple of days trying to get this working. And so what I see is right now, the Arduino's graphics library is buggy when it comes to the Arduino R4 Wi-Fi. So we have to just go back and kind of do it brute force by individually modifying the frame, as I just showed you how to do. Okay, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the one thing I was able to get working was to be able to put text on here. So let me go ahead, and I'm sorry if this is getting to be a little bit of a long lesson, but let me show you how to do that. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start over, and I'll show you how to do text, but don't worry, it's not that much. It is not that much code. So we're going to go back to bare minimum, if you will. We're going to go back to bare minimum, if you will. You can just open up bare minimum if you don't want to do it. Okay, so I've kept the include Arduino matrix H, but it seems like that there's another library, and it seemed to me like you really needed to load it first. So this seems to, at least I convinced myself that you needed to do it in this order. You need to load Arduino graphics.h, like that. Arduino graphics.h. And then you include Arduino LED matrix H, like that. And then what do? You create your matrix object just like you did before. Okay, now what do I want to do? I am going to create a message. So I'm going to create a variable string, and I'm going to call it the variable name message, like that. And I'm going to say like a space, 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 and you'll see why I do that later. And then welcome to toptechboy.com. And then I'm going to put an exclamation, and then I'm going to say boom, like that, exclamation, and then some trailing things. Okay, so that is my message that I'm going to want to send to, that's the message that I'm going to want to send to the matrix. Okay, down in the void setup, I need to do a serial.begin again. 115. I can't do that. I've got to set it up here. My int baud rate is going to be equal to 115,200. Let's be good about using variables. Serial.begin at RBR for baud rate. Okay. And then did I close this up here with a semicolon? I didn't. It doesn't count as an error if you catch it before you run it. And remember, these library loads, you don't put semicolons on the end of those. Okay, so we did serial.begin. Now, what do we need to turn on? Our matrix.begin, like that. Okay, could it really be that easy? Could it really be that easy? Now, with this library where we're not just using calling the methods of Arduino LED matrix H, but we're going to be calling methods in this one, we've got to do things a little different. The first thing that we have to do is we have to do a matrix.begin draw. Okay, so I got to say, hey, wake up, Mr. Matrix. I'm going to draw something. Okay, now what I need to do next is I've got to tell it something about a font. Matrix.text font. Okay, and that is going to be font _ 5x7. Now, as far as I can tell right now, there are two fonts. 5x7, which the letters are almost the height of the matrix, and 4x6, which is just a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. So it's like, those are your choices. Live with it. Okay, so I've got my text font. Now I need to do a matrix.begin text. So I'm saying, I woke it up. Hey, I'm going to draw something. Hey, keep listening. I'm going to put some text on there. And where do I want the text to start? I want it to start at row. Okay, row 0. No. Okay, this is where it gets confusing. You know how so far we've always gone row column, row column, row column. Well, what this matrix begin text wants, it doesn't want row column, it wants X and then Y. What is X? X is the column. What is Y? The row. So we've always been doing row, column, row, column, row, column. Now we got to do column, row. Well, what column do I want to start in? I want to start in column 0. And now what row? Well, you might say row 0. But remember, I told you that this library doesn't seem to be able to write anything to row 0. So we better start at row 1. Now I've got to give it an RGB color. Now don't get excited when I say that, because the only thing that you can render is red because they're red LEDs. And so you've got to put something in here, but I just put 255 red full on, green 0, and blue 0, like that. Now, I also got excited here and I thought, well, at least I could dim them by changing the 255 up and down, but I could never get that to work either. So maybe I don't understand it fully, or maybe there's commands I don't know, but I've just got to put 255, 0, 0. If I put 100, it would still be the same brightness. I haven't been able to figure out how to get this thing to dim yet. So I begin the draw, I tell it what font I'm using, I begin the text, and now this is what I'm going to do. Matrix.println, and what I'm going to print my message like that, and then I'm going to come here like that. Okay, now what do I need to do? I need to matrix.end the text. That kind of makes sense, right? And then I need to what? Matrix.end the draw, like that. Okay, that look good? Let's try that. Okay, so we're going to run this. See how many errors I introduced. Yeah. What is that? Were you guys yelling at me? Mr. Semicolon. You know, and finally, after working on the Arduino for about 3 months, I'm going to go back and make MicroPython lessons. And what's going to happen? I'm going to be putting semicolons at the end of everything. Okay, which MicroPython doesn't want. Okay, so I look at this and I don't see anything. Why do you think I don't see anything? Okay, why do you think I don't see anything? Well, I put all these spaces up here, and probably what it just printed was a bunch of blank spaces. So let's come in and let's try this and see if that'll work. I took those leading spaces out. Okay, now what is the challenge that we have? I said, welcome to toptechboy.com, exclamation space, boom, all that. And I got 2 letters on there. So we have a problem, but you'd say, well, that's kind of useless, isn't it? No, because what I can do is when I end the text, I can give it our magical command, scroll. I can send it the parameter scroll left. Okay, and now let's go back and let's put those leading spaces back in here like that. And so now let's run that and see if that's enough to get something that works. Watching this. Well, it seems to be scrolling. It's going a little bit too fast. So how do we slow that down? Well, after we do the begin draw, we need to tell it a matrix.text scroll speed. Okay. Now, here is the doofus thing about this. The larger you make the scroll speed, the smaller it scrolls. So if I made it 200, it would go much slower than 100. So it kind of goes backwards from what normal people would think. All right, so let's come in here. Let's run this. And then that looks like it's going to run. Let's come over here. And let's all eyes here. Welcome to toptechboy.com, and boom, look at that. All right, look at that, guys. That is pretty cool, isn't it? I think it could go a little bit faster than that. And so let's take this down over here. I'd like it to go a little bit faster. So I'm going to make this a slower. I'm going to make this a smaller number here. Let's make this 50 like that. Okay. So that's 50. And then what is the other thing that let's just do that. Okay. Let's do that and then see what happens. Let's see if it's a little more readable at 50. Here it comes. Here it comes. And there it goes. Welcome to Top Tech Boy. I think that's a good speed. You might make it go a little bit faster. It might be harder to read if you didn't know what it was. So I think that's good. Now let me show you something here. Okay, let me show you something. Let's say that you come over here and you say, well, I want to use that top row. So I'm going to go column 0 and I'm going to go row 0 on the begin text. And now let's run that. And it's going to move it up one row. Okay, it's going to move it up one row. Okay, but do you see what's happened? It has cut the top off. It has cut the top off. And it also looks like it kind of locked it up. And so when we try to run it on that first row, it looks like it even locks it up. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back and make this a 1 here again. And now let's see if that's going to run. It's kind of strange, isn't it? So like I say, I think there's still bugs. I think there's still bugs in the library. And maybe by the time you guys get to this class, maybe some of those things are going to be fixed. But you see there, it's working properly if you just don't try to write to row 0. Did it really just kill the program to even try to write to those rows? Let me try that one more time to write to that top row. Yeah, it just locks it up. If you try to address that top row, it locks it up. Don't know why. Don't know why. Okay, we'll put this back here. All right, let's see here. Let me think a little bit about what else we want to do today. I'm sorry this was a little bit of a long lesson, but I really didn't want to make it, I really didn't want to make it 2 lessons. And so this lesson ran a little bit long. And let's see, I need to give you guys a homework. Okay, I'm going to give you a homework. Now, what I will admit is I will admit that this is a stretch. Okay, this is a stretch. But I have taught you enough that you could figure this out. I have taught you enough that you could figure this out. So I'm going to show you what your homework assignment is. Your homework is to create a moving pixel. 1 pixel on at a time, and it's going to be a moving pixel, okay? And what is it going to do? It is going to bounce around. I got one thing in there that I should not have in there. Let me do this one more time. Give me just a second. Give me just a second here. I had an erroneous pixel on. You see I have a pixel that's staying still there. Okay, so what do I have? I have one pixel. Hold on, guys. Give me just a second here. A more adept YouTuber would have had this ready to work the first time. Okay, so I'm going to have 1 pixel. And the pixel moves around and it just keeps moving. But when it hits a wall, it doesn't jailbreak. It doesn't go away. It bounces off the top. It bounces off the right, it bounces off the bottom, and it bounces off the left. And so what your homework assignment is to go in and make yours do this. Okay, your homework assignment is to make yours do this. Now, I want you to kind of think of where I was going with this, right? Where I was going with this is what you saw a while ago was What you saw a while ago was there was one pixel that was standing still over here, and then the other pixel was bouncing all over. Now, what do you think I might do with that one pixel there? See if you can kind of see where my mind is going with what we might be able to do with this. If you think I've got a pixel here that isn't bouncing, and then this one is bouncing all around, what could I maybe even do on this thing? Kind of a direction that we might go spend a couple of lessons. But right now, what it is for you to just get your pixel bouncing around. Think about it, try hard, see if you can figure it out. And if you can't, don't worry about it. Just the next lesson, I'll show you how to do it. So some of you new guys, this might be a little bit of a stretch for you, but you guys that have played with the Arduino or gone through the MicroPython lessons, you should be able to work a problem like this at this point. Okay, guys, I hope you're having as much fun taking these classes as I am making them. As always, I want to thank you guys that are standing with me on Patreon. Your support and your encouragement keeps this content coming. You can also help me by giving me a thumbs up and leaving a comment down below. Make sure if you have not already, you subscribe to the channel. And when you do, be sure to ring that bell so you'll get notification when future lessons drop. And as always, share this video with other people because the world needs more people thinking like an engineer and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.